Hello and welcome to the channel. Thank you very much indeed to the sponsors. It is really you that make it worthwhile continuing to make these videos. And I'm very grateful for your interest in what I have to say, in the time that you spend watching them, and especially for your incredible generosity towards me. So thank you again. As usual, this is for you. I suppose some comments are in order on the sloop that was in the previous video. So this is going to be a hodgepodge video of talking about the sloop and talking about any and everything else that occurs to me in the next few minutes. Organization is not the strong point of this video. So returning to a couple of things. First of all, no one is more surprised than me that I'm back on the channel and that I'm recording a video now and that you see me alive and more or less complete. That is because of what I did during the show on the USS New Jersey. Evidently, I have hit the wrong button on the recording, the sound recorder. And it is only by the grace of God that I'm still alive. What I have been done to, there's no talking. All right, actually nothing at all, but let's put it politely that the sister channel, the director of this channel, was thoroughly unhappy with me. To all of you who actually suffered through that video and the soundtrack, thank you. You helped me survive. So I do appreciate it. Returning to the video on the sloop last time. Thank you very much for the comments. I actually did read them. At the moment I am really hard pressed for time because I have to complete the manuscript of this by now historical book by December, January at the latest. And the recs are a lot. Many of them are very well preserved. There is a lot of writing and even more drawing to be done on them, and I just do not have the time to do everything, especially now that on Monday the semester begins, so duty calls. And of course during the summer I actually was quite productive as far as the book is concerned, but it has to be pointed out that I also spend significant number of weeks this summer, pretty much the entire summer, chasing shipwrecks in the Black Sea as usual. More about it at a different point, but returning to the sloop. So yes, I did read the comments. I will try to answer and address them in the video now, rather than typing answers in underline. So, yes, I used to build models, I used to play with ship models. Never on the level at which Olia produces them. I was never interested in competitions. I was never interested in exhibits. I built these things for my own pleasure, as toys for my own enjoyment. And the reason that I build them is because I'm interested in how shape. I'm interested in how this looked. I began life as an engineer student. I grew up in an engineering family, so reading drawings is not a challenge at all for me. It's second nature. And yet, the three-dimensional object has a certain beauty to it that I enjoy. Now this, for example, sloop, referred to earlier videos on it, but I never intended it to be a real model. Never at all. It's not what I wanted. I wanted to have something that will show the shape of the vessel so that I can show it to students when I'm teaching ships and shipwrecks at the Americas, which incidentally I'm teaching this semester at the University of Connecticut. And because this is one of the very few early American possibly seagoing, most probably riverine craft surviving, I always included in my lectures, as you know, it was excavated in the early 90s by Fred Hocker when he was professor of nautical archaeology at the Texas A&M University, the nautical archaeology program. And the vessel survived quite extensively, with the exception of the bow, which was intentionally cut off. However, it was cut only the last few feet of the bow. So by this stage, the planks were beginning to narrow and to close towards the stem, so there aren't that many different ways that you could finish them. So although the stem profile is a reconstruction, Fred Hawker's reconstruction, it is pretty convincing. There was not much doubt about it. And I like the shape of this vessel because it has all the characteristics of the so-called Baltimore Clippers of the 1830s. And of course, at the time when the ship actually sailed, there was no such term. Baltimore Clippers is an anachronistic term. This is the one mistake. I think I caught Patrick O'Brien in only 2 or 3 mistakes in all his 20 plus volumes of the Jack Aubrey stories, by a far great distance, my favorite nautical stories. But returning to this, there he calls Ringo, the schooner that Jack Aubrey wins on cards from N.H. Dundas, he calls her a Baltimore Clipper. Well, it is a term that would have meant nothing to Jack Aubrey and his contemporaries. This comes much later in the 19th century into play. These vessels actually were, at the time when they were operated, at the turn of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century, during the War of 1812, they were known as built on the pilot schooner model. But we assume that all of them were very sharp, lined, sharp-hulled. If you look at this sloop, not at all. It is fairly shallow. It is broad-bottomed. It carries the beam extremely far forward, but it does have a very narrow run and would have had a pretty significant drop down by the stern in proper sailing trim. This would have been an incredible sailor. Looking at these lines, I think that I have mistaken my career. Instead of professor of maritime archaeology, I should have become a bank robber. Then I would have been able to afford to build one of these for my private yacht. Now, whether I would have had the old American skipper's abilities to sail her without capsizing this overspotted vessel, it's a different story. Now, returning to the model. So, this was supposed to be just something showing the shape. I probably would have spray painted it or something like this to cover up the insides, to make students visualize how the drawings, the reconstruction drawings, translate into a three-dimensional object. It is something that computers cannot do, or at least not to old geezers like me. So that was the idea behind it. In fact, the construction of this model to a large extent was inspired by Abhoffing's cardboard models and research. And I think I discussed the construction before, but anyway, it was built up of cardboard, and the card from egg cartons. These are the strips that I used to plank the vessel. And I thought, nice and dandy, I will even it out with bundle, sand it with the car repair filler for the non-Americans, and, you know, even it out, maybe spray paint it, and done deal. That's it. Would I be left in peace to go this way? Of course not. The first thing that Ollie started needling me about is that if I have gone that far and I have constructed this, I really should plank it with wood. I ignored her. I mean, what married man does not know how to ignore his spouse? Enters here, exits there, because there is nothing in between to keep it there. 2, 3 times. The 4th time, for some reason I entered here the shop, and what do I see? There is a pile of planks already milled for this. Well, do you think I had any choice, any option at this stage? Of course not. I couldn't do anything but blank it. I thought this would be the end of it. Okay, blank, yeah, okay, she's right, looks better. But no. So now what was supposed to be a visual aid to aid a lecture is beginning to look like a ship model. Then the next stage, you know the old story about the man who found a button on the street, so went to the tailor and said, "Master tailor, sew me a coat to go with this button." It is a relevant story. She was building tillers, I think she built a tiller for Speedy probably. And for some reason the tiller that she built, either she misplaced it and had to build another one and then the other one showed up, or something was wrong with it, I no longer remember, and it hardly matters. But she handed me the tiller for this little model and said, well, it will look weird without a rudder. So she developed a rudder for it. And as you can see, it has a rudder and a tiller. I thought that with this we have come to completion. Wrong again, of course. The Pintos and gudgeons, I'll immediately tell you, are entirely her product. I had nothing to do with them except blackening them and attaching them to the hull, which opens another rabbit warren for me. And my students are quite used to this. My mind works along these lines. But in this case, let us address the issue, what do you do with Pintos and gudgeons? On many, many models, I see them left shining brass. And for the lower ones, that would be appropriate if you have coppered the vessel, the way Boreas next to me is coppered. Then in the later 19th century, by later 19th century I mean the Napoleonic period, sorry. By the time new vessels had been built after the introduction of copper and copper bolts were used in fastening the frames, etc., yes, you would expect Pintos and gudgeons to be copper, but the truth of the matter is that usually they were painted. It was not so much to preserve them, because this is iron, it will continue rusting no matter what you do. But when you are applying the paint on the bottom of the vessel, it's going to cover them. So as you can see, they are painted here. Now, while I was safely put away underwater in the Black Sea, Olya evidently was painting something and decided to paint the model for me. That's lovely and I'm deeply appreciative, of course, except that there was a slight disagreement on the color scheme. I had intended the vessel to be with pale sides or ochre sides, but there is a painting that you can find actually online if you look for it, of the Clydesdale Plantation sloop. There is a link here. That was colored by Emma Hawker after Fred did the reconstruction of the vessel. And there, the bottom is dark, there is the ochre sheer strake and black lower part of the hull, or dark brown and black. And that is a possible scheme, certainly, especially if the vessel was intended to operate only in fresh water. Considering where it was found up the river, this probably connected the plantation down with the coastal area and probably carried rice. At least that was one of the hypotheses that Fred came up with, because of the complete sealing and caulking of the sealing planks inside the vessel. And he thought that this is, he interpreted it as adaptation for the carrying of grain cargo, specifically rice from there. As you know, rice should be kept dry, tends to be hygroscopic, etc., etc. So if it was in the river, just tarred lower hull probably is appropriate. But to my eye, it looked weird, because I am envisioning this as a coastal craft. And this is purely in my mind. I don't know for a fact how the owners of the sloop used it prior to running it into the shore to shore up the dikes. But if this vessel was intended to ever to sail outside of the river on coastal cruises, she is almost certainly going to have been covered with white lead and tallow on the bottom, because this is the way they used to protect against the redu navalis, to a lesser level growth of sea material. And that is why we had to repaint the bottom into what I imagine is a more appropriate color of the vessel. So to answer now the questions that were under the video. You asked, I was asked whether I build models that you were not aware of. Yes, I do build models. I do not dare to call them models anymore. I have a vast collection of models that are in different states of unfinish. One dates to the days of my master's thesis. It began as really experiments in recreating frames from earlier ships. Essentially, they looked like Navy board frames. And by the time I was done, I was testing hypotheses that I had on how and why the traditional Navy board style of models emerged. One day I'll write an article about it, if I live long enough. But returning to it, by the end of the day I had so many such fragments from bow through stern that I glued them together in an idea that I will eventually build a Navy board style. I sort of planked it. And never completed it. So we're talking about 1998-99. That model is still as incomplete as it was back then. I think you know as well as I do what date we are now. Then there is a small schooner. I was curious to experiment with the Harold Hahn system. Problem was that I, at the time, had virtually no tools. So the frames were cut with a Swiss Army knife and a pen knife. And for this reason, they are actually undersized in comparison with what they should have been. It is the Sir Edward Hawke schooner, which Harold Hahn published in the first volume of the Tips and Notes of the Nautical Research Guild. And I planked it up to the whales, I think. And it's not going to win me any concours d'élégance. I mean, it's not the quality of Olia, but gave me plenty of enjoyment. It was built I reached that stage in 2001. 24 years later, now and then looking at it while it is sitting on top shelf of my bookcases in the dining area, I said, oh, one day I probably should finish it. That day, ladies and gentlemen, has not yet come. It probably will be about the time of the second coming of Christ, at the speed with which I am building vessels at the moment. So, yes, I do play with models. No, Olia is the grandmaster. I am very far from it. To me, models are test platforms. Yes, I would love to have a 17th century model display somewhere in the house. Will I get one? Probably not. But one is entitled to dreaming. With this, I think it is time to bring this video to a close. Thank you so very, very much for watching, putting up with my rambling chats, for your generous sponsorship of the channel. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.